everyone. Welcome back to my podcast. Today, we continue to explore the truth about Atlantis. Experts suggest that if oceans once crossed the Sahara Desert, this scenario might belong to the era of the dinosaurs. A study in 2019 revealed that between 56 million to 66 million years ago, this region was indeed divided by an ocean. But how does this explain the fossils of giant whales found here? Considering the history of whales is only about 50 million years, and 50 million years ago, they were living on land like today's hippos. Not to mention, these giant whales likely have a history of less than 5 million years. Experts are still researching this issue, but investigator Emi Koussi proposes a hypothesis that maybe things are not as ancient as we think. Take Emi Koussi, the highest peak in Sahara, for example. In 2003, NASA, together with the French National Science Academy's Volcano Laboratory, conducted a survey on Emi Koussi. The survey showed that although Emi Koussi is now a dormant volcano, its active period lasted from 2.4 million years ago up to 24,000 years ago, with its last eruption possibly around 24,000 years ago, after which it became dormant. Further observation of satellite images of Emi Koussi reveals clear eruption traces around it. If these traces come from the last eruption, 24,000 years ago, then a clearly eroded fault on the southeast side indicates that after the last eruption, there was a huge flow of water that washed away these eruption traces, strongly proving that there was a large sea in the Sahara area 24,000 years ago. However, this isolated piece of evidence is not enough to fully explain the mystery. Continuing the search for traces of the ocean inside the Sahara Desert, we soon found another very unique clue. When we look back 20,000 years ago, the Sahara Desert was a vibrant green Eden. Scientists have reconstructed the geological and ecological landscape of that time, showing a scene with many lakes and wetlands across the Sahara. In this comparative map, we can clearly see that there were indeed many nessus near the eye of the Sahara, with the most notable lake being Lake Chad, which still exists today. It is through the study of the sediments of Lake Chad that scientists have mapped out the ancient landscape of the Sahara 20,000 years ago. However, Lake Chad itself presents a series of puzzling clues. One significant contradiction is that Lake Chad seems more like an ancient Sea of Chad because of the large amount of marine sediments and still moist saline alkali lands found there, suggesting it was once a vast water body connected to the ocean rather than just a lake. This raises a question. We all know that water flows downhill, and the sea level is considered the lowest point on Earth. Therefore, an inland water body connected to the sea at both ends theoretically shouldn't exist unless, like the Caspian Sea, Lake Chad is in a basin below sea level, allowing seawater to gather. However, the reality is that Lake Chad is more than 400 meters above sea level. This means that 20,000 years ago, a sea appeared in the sky, surpassing the high technology that could be imagined by prehistoric Atlantis. What technology and purpose could be behind creating such a sky sea? Therefore, the key to unlocking the mystery of the sky sea is not here. Where then could the real answer lie? Next, Emi will propose a brand new hypothesis, leading us step by step to unveil the truth about Atlantis. Plato described the south side of Atlantis as a vast sea from which one could travel to any part of the world. He also mentioned that Atlantis was made up of multiple concentric sea rings, which were closely linked and connected to the southern sea. From this description, we can hypothesize that the eye of the Sahara was also filled with seawater 20,000 years ago. But to display the scene described by Plato, the sea level would need to rise at least 400 meters. However, it's impossible that the sea level 20,000 years ago was 400 meters higher than today, since there's no evidence of such in other parts of the world. Even the well-known Younger Dryas event only caused the sea level to rise by about 20 meters. It's worth noting that 24,000 years ago, the sea level was actually about 140 meters lower than it is now. So, how do we explain the unusual sea level conditions of the Eye of the Sahara? Could it also be a sky sea, like the ancient Sea of Chad? Are the Nessus described by Plato not islands in the sea, but islands in the sky? Did the army of Atlantis really set out from these sky islands to attack ancient Athens? Although this sounds like a scene from a fantasy adventure animation, what really happened 20,000 years ago? Jimmy recalls the details of the destruction of Atlantis mentioned by Plato. Besides the flood, there was also an earthquake, an unprecedentedly strong earthquake. We usually think earthquakes cause land to sink, but in reality, earthquakes can sometimes raise the land. The place ships cannot reach, mentioned by Plato, was not because it sank into the sea due to a tsunami, but because intense seismic activity thrust it into the sky. So could the catastrophic event that destroyed Atlantis 11,600 years ago be seen as a kind of Earth-scale seesaw effect? This line of thought led Jimmy to think of Zealandia, a sunken continent confirmed by scientists in 2019. Zealandia, located around New Zealand, has been confirmed by scientists as a real sunken continent. Although the exact time of its sinking is not clear, the reason for its sinking is due to plate tectonics. This process caused the land to be stretched and become thinner and thinner, eventually sinking to the bottom of the sea like a thin pancake. In contrast, the land we live on is like a bun rising from the sea surface, while Zealandia was also land protruding from the sea, but became too thin and sank below sea level, leaving only New Zealand's two main islands visible above the sea surface today. This process can be explained by plate tectonic theory, suggesting that the Earth's surface behaves like a seesaw game. When one side of the land sinks below sea level, does it mean the other side will be raised? Although this speculation sounds very bold, interestingly, the Sahara Desert in West Africa and Zealandia form a kind of axial mirror image on Earth, as if going straight through the Earth from the Sahara would lead to New Zealand. Therefore, we do not rule out the possibility that while Zealandia sank, the Sahara region could have been raised due to this seesaw effect of the Earth. This might also explain why the ancient Sea of Chad is more than 400 meters above sea level today, and why the Eye of the Sahara would only match Plato's description if the sea level rose by 400 meters. It's very likely that during the global catastrophe around 11,600 years ago, known as the Younger Dryas event, the sinking of Zealandia and the rising of the Sahara were two aspects of the same process. Although current scientific evidence primarily focuses on the global ice age caused by this event, with glaciers expanding to today's Turkey area, perhaps beyond current research, there was a rise and fall between New Zealand and the Sahara Desert. The ancient civilization at the Eye of the Sahara, Atlantis, might have been right at the center of this massive change. Intense earthquakes destroyed their civilization's remains, and huge tsunamis swept these fragments directly into the Atlantic Ocean, pulling the entire Sahara Eden from beneath the sea to reveal it to the world. This disaster can be likened to quickly pulling a plate out of water, as only this action could generate enough water force and impact. Evidence for this catastrophe includes whale fossils found in the desert, the floating Lake Chad, and those lost Nessus recorded by Plato. Together they prove that before this great disaster, the Sahara was once traversed by an ocean. After the disaster, the Sahara region was raised, and the once Eden gradually dried up, eventually turning into the desert we see today around 3,000 years ago. This explains why Solon, 2,600 years ago, could still converse with Egyptian priests in the temple. But just 100 years later, Herodotus could only see pyramids buried by sand dust upon his visit to Egypt. Another 100 years passed, and Plato could only recount those myth-like stories told by Solon about Atlantis. This is because the Sahara rose very quickly, experiencing its last moment of glory within a mere 200 years from Solon to Plato, and ancient Egypt, located at the edge of the Sahara, also dried up along with the legend of Atlantis. The reason ancient Egyptian priests could tell the story of Atlantis to Solon is that they claimed to have a brotherly connection with the Atlantis civilization. Perhaps the pyramids and the Sphinx, among other relics, are legacies left from the Atlantis era, fortunately not destroyed by the rise of the Sahara. With that, today's podcast comes to an end. Thank you all for listening. If you liked this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Looking forward to meeting you in the next episode.